You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
So late last week, the breaking news story was Portland's rapid response team, which is a group of about 50 police officers from within the general rank and file of the Portland Police Bureau. It's an assembly of volunteers, of officers who volunteer for the rapid response team. They basically said, hey, we're disbanding. We are voluntarily disbanding because we don't know whether we're coming or going and what our liability should be on how to simply do our jobs. And the disbanding was over one of their members was breaking up an arrest during a protest that had been turned into a riot. And he used his baton in a way that the district attorney is saying that is fourth-degree assault, something like that. I can't even remember the charge. But it was so ridiculous that the entire rapid response team, the team that goes out and basically takes care of these riots, let's call it what they are. They're riots when you try and, do all the stuff that, what would arguably start off as peaceful protests for the first however many minutes, and then they devolve into one of these riots. That's the team that goes out there and takes care of all this nonsense. You no longer have that team in Portland. And Portland's had how many nights in a row of protests, last summer and into the fall? I mean, 100, 120, 150. It's a lot. That's what we're reading about today. Why we're reading about this on a real estate podcast? Because communities, neighborhoods are governed by laws. Law and order are important. And if you don't have said law and order, that impacts the community, impacts what's going on with real estate, doesn't it? Yep, it does. All right. So if you're new here, my name's Sean Reynolds. I own two real estate companies. I own a real estate brokerage and an appraisal company. And I read the news. It's what we're doing. Portland's rapid response team commander. This is from the commander. Officers can't serve on team under the extreme liability they face. So we've got these internal investigations going on throughout all this stuff. I think at CHOP or over the last summer, there were 19,000 complaints against the Seattle Police Department. And what? A handful stuck. So 18,950 were thrown out the window. Why? Because they were nonsense. But everybody sees, there was 19,000 complaints. Police are bad. Except when something bad happens to me, I'm going to dial 911 as fast as the next guy. And I expect them to come and help me out. Crazy times, right? I mean, when this is your reality and you're like, okay, but the person that you're hammering on here, the police, they're going to be the ones to come save you next. So is this really the road you want to go down? Commander of Portland's rapid response team had called a meeting of the specialized units, approximately 50 officers, at the Penumbra Kelly Building in southeast Portland Wednesday night to hear their concerns. Just over 2 hours later, all the officers present voted to resign from the specialized crowd control team. They cited a host of factors. Not shocking. A lack of clear direction from the chief's office. Yep. Changing interpretations of police force directives and policies. We don't really know which direction we should go in enforcing the law, right? Officer safety concerns. Hey, they're throwing water bottles at us. Now, they are frozen, but, we're right to the head with a frozen water bottle. Horrible. And what they called, amongst all the other nonsense that is thrown at police during these peaceful protests, and what they called inconsistent internal reviews of officers' actions. Okay. Though the team members are hopeful that some of these issues can be resolved, they believe the problems have become so severe they cannot continue to serve on the team under the extreme liability they are currently facing, wrote Lieutenant Jacob Clark, commander of the rapid response team, in a memo to Police Chief Chuck Lovell Thursday morning, obtained by the Oregonian /OregonLive. The unprecedented move by about 50 officers, detectives, and sergeants to disband their own team came a day after a team member, Officer Corey Budworth, was indicted on a fourth-degree assault charge, accused of striking a woman in the head with a baton who he'd already knocked to the ground during a protest last summer near the Multnomah building. Rapid response team, they got to deal with some harsh conditions. They've got knuckleheads that they're dealing with, right? I mean, that's what they're dealing with. They are dealing with out of control knuckleheads that are doing crazy stuff that's against the law, bring out the rapid response team. That's who handles it. So now Portland doesn't have that team anymore. What's going to happen? Are we going to have the junior varsity rapid response team? Is that going to get put together with a bunch of young, inexperienced officers who are going to make more mistakes? Probably, because you still need to deal with these peaceful protesters, right? The discussion during the evening gathering of rapid response team members was described as robust and professional, but the actual decision to resign from the voluntary team membership was characterized as very emotional. And you could see how these cops, they take an oath of duty to, protect safety, whatever, how that whole thing goes for, the general public. You're an officer of the law, you take an oath. Okay, but this is an extra that they're doing. They are volunteering to be part of the rapid response team. And they are saying, oh, yeah, you know what? My main gig, just being an officer, is enough liability alone. This extra thing here, yeah, if you're going to take down one of our team members and you're actually going to indict him for that, we're not down with that. That's exactly what happened. You're going to indict him for press charges for doing his job? Okay, yeah, we're not down with that. Though the officers didn't take a vote of no confidence in police brass, political leaders, or the county's top prosecutor, the memo reads like one. The team strongly feels there's been a significant lack of leadership from the chief's office, city hall, local political leaders, and the district attorney's office, it said. The team recognizes leadership is complicated and multifaceted. However, they believe there's been little clear guidance offered to the team, Clark wrote. The lack of clear guidance has led to the team to lose confidence in their decision-making and fearful of later repercussions, which they are currently experiencing in the form of delayed internal investigations. You got to let these cops do their job. That's the bottom line. You got to let them do their job. This has become nonsense. I've watched the video. I think it's nonsense. I am not an expert in what the police are supposed to be doing, but these protesters, it's ridiculous. The team members later met via Zoom video conference directly with Mayor Ted Wheeler, who serves as police commissioner. It's an interesting situation where you've got a mayor of a city who's also the police commissioner. Lovell, who was out of state in Florida attending training, dialed into the video conference as well. That's the police chief. Much of the memo describes officers' complaints that aren't new, but were raised to the chief's office last fall. So this situation is just the tip of the iceberg as far as all of the stuff that police officers who are dealing with these situations on a daily basis are facing. They've been, all of their tools for crowd control have basically been taken away. You're left with basically officers using their own bodies to kind of do their thing as far as trying to take care of these protesters who, at the point where the rapid response team comes in, it's a riot. It's a riot. They don't get called to help pick flowers, right? That's not their job. That's not their position. So this is, them resigning is kind of it's a statement that says, hey, you need to figure out which direction you want public safety to go. If you want us to lighten up on everybody, we can certainly do that, but we need to know how to do our job. And if you've taken away all the tools for us to do our job, which is the enforcement of public safety, tell us how to do it. We don't want to be charged with fourth degree assault down the road for simply doing our job. That's kind of the way I see it. I've watched all the videos. I read the complaints. I did a podcast on reading some of the complaints and what those complaints were and how they were handled. And it was basically, yeah, that's nonsense. Dismissed, 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 dismissed. 19,000 complaints against the Seattle Police Department. Most of them, almost all of them, dismissed. Many demonstrations devolved into clashes with officers late at night, and at times ended with vandalism, property damage, and fires. All right, and the police officers are not doing the vandalism, they are not doing the property damage, and they're not lighting things on fire. The protesters are. And the rapid response team is there to protect the public from said not-so-peaceful protesters, right? The team's use of force has led to multiple civil lawsuits in state and federal court, sanctions from a judge, and now an indictment. Okay, now we're really getting somewhere. All right, you're going to indict us. We're going to disband. You're going to indict us for doing our job. We're going to disband. But that seems pretty reasonable, doesn't it? I think so. You need to figure out how you want us to do our job. Tell us how to do our job. We'll go do it. We've been doing it. But you keep pulling this Mickey Mouse nonsense. We're not down. That's the bottom line, right? Any labor union is probably going to have that response. And I'm actually surprised it took this long for this kind of thing to happen. The team members cited concerns about officers injured during protests over the past year. Nobody cares about the safety of police officers, do they? No, they don't. They just don't care. And yet, like I said earlier, something bad happens to you, you're Johnny on the spot. 911, send me a cop real quick. Help. Yeah. I mean, how many times have we seen that? The peaceful protesters that were on I-5. The minute somebody drove a car onto a freeway, which is where cars belong, a couple of them got hit. Guess what? Call 911. Pretty basic stuff. So team members cited concerns over officers injured during protests over the past year, the restrictions federal judges and the mayor put on their use of force tactics, changing interpretations of the Bureau's directives governing their use of force and crowd management tactics, greater scrutiny of officers' actions than that of those causing property damage, setting fires or throwing objects at officers during protest coverage, a lack of confidence in the city's attorney's office ability to defend their actions, and insufficient backup from outside law enforcement agencies. I think we should take all of those people that we just talked about that are not providing support and put them on the front line, go cop, politician, whomever we just talked about. Put them in the front line of a particularly violent protest, which has devolved into a riot, and see how that goes. I've been close enough where there's been, confrontations between the rioters and the police. It's rough. It's not good. It's not a good scene. It's not a scene that you want to be on that front line, right? And the rioters particularly know. They've got umbrellas to hide their identity, hide them from whatever's coming. They've got ambulances. They've got like volunteer ambulances in the back that are ready to roll because they know they're going to get hurt. Some tear gassing going on. I mean, the few things that the cops do have to disperse a crowd that's gone wild. That's the bottom line, right? So the team strongly believes in the oath they originally took to protect and serve. They believe political leadership in this city allowed our community members to be victimized through criminal action because the political leaders supported the message of the demonstrators. It was the summer of love, wasn't it? Until it wasn't. And in Portland, it was longer than the summer of love. So I literally take these politicians, put them on the front line of a particularly gnarly confrontation. Let's see how that goes. That would be entertaining. The team feels this approach was unfair to the victims of the crimes committed and overrode the rule of law in this city. Can't you see Mayor Ted Wheeler taking a water bottle that's been frozen to the dome? How do you think that would go? Just the news coverage in general. And that's what these cops, they deal with. No wonder they're all geared up in military gear. They're dealing with a war zone. The team also expressed dismay that the police bureau was ordered to halt their live streaming video of the nightly demonstrations last year. Let them stream. Show it how it is. Instead, they said officers are being hauled into internal affairs inquiries based almost entirely on video submitted by the demonstrators themselves. So they're not showing full context. That is the issue. The one little clip that you see of the officer using his baton to push a gal down during a riot, let's see the full context of that. Let's see the few minutes before that. Let's see what happens. Let's take a look at that. We don't get that. All we get is the officer pushing the gal down with the baton. And nobody has said that this is not the protocol that they're taught. I mean, I haven't heard that at all, right? So if somebody knows better, and all my police officer people out there, let me know. Let me know what you think on this one. The use of live streaming video was halted as a result of a judge's temporary restraining order. Yet the team argued that the city's attorney's office had misinterpreted the judge's order. So you've just got all of this. Nobody knows which way is up. That overly restrictive and risk-averse decision protected the city while placing team members in a position of increased individual risk, the memo said. The team also cited lack of consistent review of officers' actions by the Bureau's internal affairs decision, the Multnomah County District's Attorney Office dismissal of dozens of cases by protesters. They arrested and the physical and mental toll of being out on the protest lines night after night, with city leadership basically doing nothing other than, First Amendment rights. They've got the right to do it until they don't. And then we're going to send in the rapid response team. And now we're not, because they've disbanded. The commander did not participate in the team discussion and vote, but wrote that he supported the team's decision to resign. He said the mass resignation became effective at 8 p.m. on Wednesday. The decision for the entire team to resign was not an easy one, he wrote. It is my hope, as well as the team's hope, that these issues can be properly resolved so the team can go back to serving the city of Portland as proud members of the rapid response team. All right, so the said persons that Rapid Response Team addresses on a nightly basis in Portland, what are they doing? What do they got going on? They gotta put together a big one, right? I mean, don't you think? Let's just test out this theory that the Rapid Response Team has been disbanded. Let's see what really happens. The team's resignation drew a mix of responses from community members, city officials, and other law enforcement. On Friday, Oregon's U.S. Attorney and the lead FBI agent for the state issued a joint statement. They urged community members to join law enforcement in helping to ensure all future demonstrations remain peaceful and inclusive. How about safe? Peaceful? Yeah. I would settle for safe. Communities across the nation have endured, both for those enforcing said laws and those exercising their freedom of speech. Both sides. Make it peaceful. Okay with that. And that's why we're talking about this, because they haven't been peaceful. They've been far from peaceful, wildly violent. Communities across the nation have endured many challenges over the past year as they attempt to address racial inequities in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. In Portland, those challenges include large and sometimes violent demonstrations that strained our local resources and repeatedly placed officers in the difficult position of policing large and sometimes hostile crowds. As law enforcement officials, we recognize that community members and law enforcement officers alike are responsible for their conduct, and that our judicial system is designed to address wrongdoing equally, whether by community members or law enforcement officers. Like all Portlanders, we are proud of our community's long history of peaceful, active civic activism and free speech. We are also proud of the federal, state, and local law enforcement officers who continue to respond to Portland demonstrations to ensure all community members can exercise their First Amendment rights safely and without the threat of violence. We urge community members to join law enforcement in helping to ensure all future demonstrations remain peaceful and inclusive. So Daryl Turner, president of the Portland Police Association that represents the officers, sergeants, and detectives who quit the crowd control team, said on Friday, if the rapid response team members' resignation has highlighted anything, it's that the priorities of our elected officials have failed. Yep, they have. They totally have. It's like, it's the summer of love. Until it's not. He decried what he called roving gangs of black-clad rioters that he said do not speak for the hundreds of thousands of residents and business owners of Portland who want a safe and clean city. So a lot of what I talk about is, pro-business, small business, because nobody else does. Nobody cares about small business because it just doesn't have a voice. It's like not very sexy. It's like talking about real estate, not sexy at all. I mean, it's just, you should buy this house, greatest house ever. How much of that can you take? So Mac Smith, a Black Lives Matter organizer and protester, said the resignation of the team suggested that the police system does not appear to want to be reformed. That is an interesting interpretation of what's going on. I don't think it's that they want to be reformed. They want to be clear on how to do their job, right? So a statement like that is pretty much nonsense. So that they made this high-profile yet low-impact decision to protest the investigations of officers caught abusing their power, he was caught doing his job. That's what he was caught doing. However, makes it clear that the bad apples have the sympathies of the bunch. no, you're kind of missing the whole point here. If you look through everything that has gone on, the officers have consistently done their job to the point where now they're saying, all right, you tell us how to do it. You tell us how we're going to do this because we're not dealing with all this other nonsense. On Thursday, the mayor reached out to Governor Kate Brown and said the Oregon State Police will have its mobile response team on standby to assist Portland police if protesters occur in the next few nights. That's not a long-term solution, is it? That's a short-term solution. The mayor also discussed backup support from the Oregon National Guard if necessary, according to his office. How about you just provide some support to the officers already there that know the streets of Portland? How about you do that? I don't know. That seems reasonable, but we're not really doing anything reasonable here. Portland police officers assigned to mobile field forces also likely will be called into action, and the chief can order the rapid response team officers to provide crowd control as well. An incident management team will be activated Thursday night and likely through the weekend should any problems arise, he said. The mayor, in a statement late Thursday, said, I want to acknowledge the toll this past year has taken on them and their families. They've worked long hours under difficult conditions, he said. I personally heard from some of them today, and I appreciate their willingness to share their concerns about managing the many public gatherings that often were violent and destructive. It doesn't come right out and say there were riots, but the public gatherings that were violent and destructive. All right. It's my expectation and the community's expectation that the city remains committed to public safety and effective police oversight. All right, but you still got to back the people up who are keeping you safe. Got to figure out how to do that. City leaders will continue working in partnership with Portlanders, community organizations, and police leadership to reform our community safety system. All right, that is it on that article. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think the rapid response team will they, I mean, they're not even really collectively bargaining here. They don't have a list of demands that I know of that I've seen. So what is going to happen? What are they going to do? What's going to go on? Or is this kind of just a statement they made and the chief's going to come out with something and the mayor's going to come out with something, talk about something, then we put the band back together? I don't know. It seems like this is a pretty solid statement of you don't have our back. We're not doing this voluntary gig. That's the way I see it. So, and the extreme liability they face, that to me is like, all right, you're doing your job. Let's look at it from the standpoint of small business. You are doing your job. You are doing your job the way you were trained to do your job. And now you're being indicted on 4th degree assault for doing your job. Unless I am missing something by watching the video. Maybe I am. Maybe there's something there. There's something that happened beforehand. There's something that we're not privy to that hasn't been exposed. He did this. I don't think so because, it's a pretty open indictment, right? And I think everybody else sees it as well. And I think all the other police officers see it as well that, hey, you can't nickel dime us to death on this stuff. You can't do that. We've got to have some room to be able to do our jobs. And that's basically what they're saying. And then the whole Black Lives Matter thing, that's just twisting reality. That's the statement they're making there. That's just twisting reality. Because the guy, the police officer who's being indicted, he's doing his job. That's kind of the way I see it. And sometimes when you're in a riot, things don't go peacefully. They don't go safely. People get hurt. You've got the use of tear gas. You've got the use of CS gas because that's how you disperse a crowd of violent rioters. And you might have to use your baton. Anything short of that, I mean, you've taken away most all the other tools that police officers have to use in these situations because everybody's just so worked up about First Amendment rights, which apparently include setting, garbage cans on fire, setting federal buildings on fire, trying to, hurt police officers, hurt federal officers, tear down statues, destroy public restrooms. I've seen all of this in Portland. I mean, firsthand. So we're not making this up. And, throw stuff at cops. I mean, stuff just whizzes overhead. People are throwing stuff and then something happens and, a dispersal order goes out and you basically you need to get out of that area and people don't want to leave. And then you arrest people because that's the way those things go. And in the midst of an arrest, somebody gets pretty worked up and tries to fight back against the cops. Guess what? That's illegal. And the cops do what they need to do. And then the cops get arrested for 4th degree assault. That's where we sit. And then the rapid response team says, no thanks, we'll pass. And so the Oregon State Police and the Oregon National Guard are going to have to step in because we've got a situation here. If you have another big protest, the rapid response team who knows that situation as they're the only thing between the city of Portland and these violent rioters for so many nights. And now they're not there. They're making a statement. So I don't really blame them. I think that's probably a long time coming. And I spent one night down in Portland. I spent a bunch of nights over at CHOP seeing how peaceful the protests were. And they were not peaceful. One was in Seattle. But I mean, by peaceful, I mean there wasn't any actual physical violence. There was probably a couple of arrests because somebody always gets squirrely at a protest, whether it's totally peaceful or not. Somebody gets worked up that, they were wronged somehow, and the police arrest them. And then they get let out because, the district attorneys in these cities, city attorneys, they're not really prosecuting anybody. They're not really charging anybody with anything, unless it's some just really hardcore crime. I did notice that one of the peaceful protesters that stole a gun out of a police car during last summer's protests, I think he was charged or he was sentenced. I can't remember. Or he entered in a guilty plea, I believe it was, something along those lines. So a lot of these storylines that started a year ago with these protesters doing crazy stuff are kind of coming back full circle. But it's only the very worst of them. 90%, I think it was in Portland, 90% of all of the charges brought against these protesters have been dismissed. 90%. That's just basically a rubber stamp of go out there and do your peaceful protesting. We'll see you again, son. And that's literally what's going on. So it'll be really interesting to follow, the whole rapid response team and how it evolves or devolves from there. Will they get any support from the city of Portland? I think you're going to have some back and forth. You're going to have some kind of bargaining because it can't continue the way it is, right? You got 50 cops that are basically saying, yeah, we're done. We're done. That's pretty significant. That's pretty scary. So here we sit. All right. I will cover this one. Whatever comes up, I'm going to cover it for you right here in the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for being a part. If you found this interesting or helpful or whatever, love to have you hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. We're releasing content twice a day, Monday through Friday, once a day on Saturday and Sunday. Thanks for being here. All right. We'll talk soon. Until then, stay safe. Bye for now. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll know when our next video is out.